The mist clung to the hillside like a shroud as Rose Briar made her way along the rutted path toward the village of Willowmead. Her worn boots sank into mud with each step, the familiar ache in her knees reminding her of another year gone by. At 47, Rose carried her years in the creases around her eyes and the silver strands threading through her once auburn hair, which she kept tied back with a simple length of twine. The letter that had brought her here was clutched in her hand, its parchment softened by repeated folding and unfolding during her 3-day journey from the larger town where she had been working as a scullery maid. The magistrate's summons had been unexpected. Rose had no family left to speak of, or so she had believed. Mistress Briar, the letter read in cramped, official script, you are hereby notified of an inheritance left to you by your mother's cousin, Agnes Thistle, recently deceased. Your presence is required in Willowmead to claim said property. Rose had nearly thrown the letter into the fire when it arrived. What could Agnes Thistle, a woman she had met perhaps twice in her life, have possibly left that would be worth the journey? But curiosity, that dangerous flame that even years of hardship had not fully extinguished, had won out. The plague had taken her husband, Martin, 5 winters past. Their 3 children, 2 daughters and a son, had followed him to the grave within a fortnight. Rose had survived, though there were many nights when she wondered if that was truly a blessing. She had sold what little they owned to pay for proper burials, and then walked away from the village where every face and corner held memories too painful to bear. As Rose crested the hill, Willowmead spread before her in the valley below, a collection of thatched roofs and smoking chimneys nestled between fields of barley and rye. She paused to catch her breath, studying the village she had not seen in more than 30 years. The magistrate's house was easy enough to find, the largest building on the village green, with actual glass in the windows and a coat of arms above the door. Rose hesitated before knocking, smoothing down her faded blue dress, suddenly conscious of how the years of work had thickened her hands and bent her shoulders. The door swung open to reveal a thin man with spectacles perched on a beak-like nose. "Magistrate Penley?" Rose inquired. "No, I am his clerk, Master Hobbs." The man looked her up and down with thinly veiled disdain. "You must be Mistress Briar." "I am." "You are late. We expected you yesterday." Rose bit back a sharp retort. "The roads were flooded near Crowhaven. I had to take the long way around." Master Hobbs sniffed, as if he doubted her explanation, but stepped aside to let her enter. The interior was warm and smelled of beeswax and leather-bound books. Rose stood awkwardly in the entryway, conscious of the mud she was tracking onto the polished wooden floor. "Wait here," Hobbs instructed before disappearing through a side door. Rose occupied herself by studying the tapestry hanging on the wall, a hunting scene with noblemen on horseback pursuing a stag. She was so absorbed that she jumped when a deep voice spoke behind her. "Mistress Briar, I presume? I am Magistrate Penley." The magistrate was a portly man with ruddy cheeks and a well-trimmed beard shot through with gray. Unlike his clerk, his eyes held a certain kindness. "Please come through to my study." Rose followed him into a small room lined with shelves of leather-bound books and scrolls. A fire crackled in the hearth, and Rose had to resist the urge to move closer to its warmth. "Please sit." Magistrate Penley gestured to a wooden chair across from his desk. "I understand you have traveled some distance to be here." "Yes, sir. From Hedgebrook." "Ah, Hedgebrook. Fine market town." He shuffled through some papers on his desk. "Now, as to the matter of your inheritance. Your relation, Agnes Thistle, passed away 3 months ago. She left no direct heirs, but in her will, she specifically named you as the recipient of her cottage and the surrounding land, approximately 2 acres, including an old fish pond." Rose blinked in surprise. "I barely knew the woman. We met only twice, when I was a child." "Nevertheless, you are her sole heir. The property is somewhat remote, on the edge of Willowmead, bordering the forest. The magistrate's expression turned apologetic. "I should warn you, Mistress Briar, the cottage has fallen into disrepair these last years. Agnes was quite elderly and unable to maintain it properly." "I see," Rose said, though in truth, she was bewildered. Why would Agnes leave her property to a distant relation she barely knew? "There is one more thing." The magistrate reached down and lifted something from beneath his desk. A soft whine filled the room as he revealed a rough wooden crate. Inside, a shaggy brown and white dog regarded Rose with solemn eyes. "This is Patch. He belonged to Agnes and seems to have been named for the marking around his eye. According to her will, he is also part of your inheritance." The dog, clearly a mix of several breeds, with one black patch of fur circling his right eye, tilted his head at Rose, his tail giving a tentative wag. I cannot take a dog," Rose protested. "I have no home of my own. I sleep in the kitchen at the tavern where I work." "Well," said the magistrate with a small smile, "it seems you do have a home now. And the dog comes with it, I am afraid." Those were Agnes's explicit instructions. Rose stared at the dog, who stared back with an intelligence that was almost unnerving. What would she do with a cottage she had never seen and a dog she had never met? "There is the matter of taxes, of course," the magistrate continued, "but they have been paid through the harvest season. After that, the responsibility will fall to you." Rose's heart sank. Of course there would be taxes. There always were, and they always seemed to increase when one could least afford them. Is there anything else I should know about this inheritance?" The magistrate hesitated, his fingers drumming briefly on the desk. Agnes was an unusual woman. There were rumors, of course, but in a village this size, there always are. "What sort of rumors?" "Nothing of consequence," he said dismissively. "Old village superstitions. Agnes kept to herself in her later years. Some found that suspicious." He closed the ledger before him with finality. "Now, Master Hobbs will provide you with the key and directions to the property. The dog is yours to take immediately." Rose left the magistrate's house with the key to her new cottage, a crude map drawn by Master Hobbs, and Patch trotting at her heels. The dog seemed remarkably well behaved, staying close without a lead, occasionally looking up at her as if to ensure she was still there. As they walked through the village, Rose noticed the curious stares of the villagers. When she passed the village well, she overheard two women whispering. "That is her, Agnes's heir. Poor soul does not know what she is walking into. They say the place is cursed." "Hush, Marta. It is not cursed, just unusual." Rose quickened her pace, Patch keeping stride. The road narrowed as they left the village proper, becoming little more than a footpath that wound through meadows and eventually into a stand of ancient oak trees. The shadows deepened beneath the gnarled branches, and Rose found herself glancing over her shoulder more than once, unable to shake the feeling that they were being watched. After nearly an hour's walk, the trees thinned, revealing a clearing. In its center stood what must have been Agnes Thistle's cottage, and Rose's heart sank at the sight. The thatched roof was in disrepair, with visible holes where rain must pour through. One of the shutters hung askew, and the small garden was overgrown with weeds and brambles. A decrepit stone wall enclosed the property, crumbling in several places. Beyond the cottage, Rose could make out what must have been the fish pond, now a stagnant pool choked with reeds and algae. "This is it, then," she murmured to Patch, who looked up at her with what almost seemed like sympathy. "Our grand inheritance." As they approached the cottage, the door swung open with a mournful creak, though Rose was certain she had not yet used the key. Inside, dust motes danced in the shafts of light that penetrated the gloom through gaps in the roof and walls. A table and chair stood in one corner, a bed frame with a straw-filled mattress in another. A stone hearth dominated the far wall, cold ashes within. The cottage smelled of damp and neglect, but beneath those scents, Rose detected something else: herbs and spices, as if years of cooking had infused the very walls. Patch trotted into the cottage ahead of her, sniffing at every corner. He stopped at the hearth, pawing at the stone floor before it, then looked back at Rose expectantly. "What is it, boy?" she asked, moving closer. The dog pawed at the floor again, more insistently. Rose knelt down, brushing aside the ashes. There, she saw what had caught Patch's attention, a stone that seemed slightly different from the others, with a small indentation at one edge. Curiosity piqued, Rose worked her fingers into the gap and pulled. The stone lifted, revealing a small hollow beneath. Inside lay a leather-bound journal, its cover worn but intact. Rose lifted it out carefully, blowing dust from its surface. Opening it, she found page after page of cramped handwriting, recipes interspersed with what appeared to be diary entries. The first page bore a simple inscription: "The Kitchen Grimoire of Agnes Thistle, Cook and Herbalist." Rose sat back on her heels, the journal in her lap, as Patch curled up beside her with a contented sigh. Outside, the light was fading. Soon it would be dark, and she had no candles, no food, and a roof that would offer little protection should it rain. "Well, Patch," she said, "it seems we have our work cut out for us." That night, Rose slept poorly on the lumpy mattress, the journal tucked safely beneath her pillow. Patch lay at her feet, his warmth the only comfort in the chilly cottage. Rain began to fall in the small hours, finding its way through the holes in the thatch and dripping steadily onto the floor. Rose moved her bed twice to avoid the leaks, finally giving up and sitting by the hearth, wrapped in her cloak. As dawn broke, the rain ceased. Rose ventured outside to survey her inheritance in the clear morning light. The cottage looked, if possible, even more dilapidated than it had yesterday. The garden was a tangle of weeds, though Rose noticed with interest that among them grew herbs, rosemary, thyme, and others she couldn't immediately identify. The fish pond, a stone-lined pool about 20 paces in diameter, lay beyond the garden. As Rose approached, Patch raced ahead, barking excitedly. He circled the pond, then plunged into the murky water without hesitation.
"Patch."
"Come back here," Rose called, alarmed. The dog paddled to the center of the pond, then began diving beneath the surface. Each time he emerged, he barked at Rose insistently. "What has gotten into you?" she muttered, peering into the cloudy water. "There cannot be fish in there still, can there?" Patch continued his strange behavior, diving and surfacing, each time seeming more frustrated that Rose did not understand what he was trying to show her. Finally, shaking water from his coat, he trotted back to shore, fixing her with a reproachful gaze before heading back toward the cottage. Rose followed, puzzled. "Fine, keep your secrets. I have work to do." Her first priority was the roof. Rose spent the morning gathering rushes from the pond's edge, then climbing precariously onto the roof to patch the worst of the holes. It was exhausting work, and by midday, her hands were raw and her back ached fiercely. But the roof, at least, would keep out the next rainfall. When she climbed down, she found Patch had disappeared again. Calling his name yielded no response. Worried, Rose circled the cottage, then expanded her search to the garden and pond. Just as she was about to give up, she heard scratching from inside the cottage. Entering, she found Patch digging frantically at the dirt floor in the corner farthest from the hearth. "Stop that," Rose scolded, moving to pull him away. But as she approached, she noticed something gleaming in the freshly turned earth. Kneeling, she brushed aside the soil to reveal a small metal box, its surface tarnished with age. Rose lifted it out, surprised by its weight. There was no lock, just a simple clasp that opened with a gentle pressure. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, lay a single piece of parchment, a deed to the cottage and land, dated nearly a century earlier. But what caught Rose's attention was the name of the original owner, Lord Vincent Ravenscroft, Earl of Nethermere. Rose frowned. Why would a nobleman's deed be buried beneath the floor of a peasant woman's cottage? And how had Agnes come to possess the property? Patch whined, nudging her hand with his nose. You are full of surprises, are not you? Rose scratched behind his ears. What else are you going to show me? The answer came sooner than she expected. That evening, as Rose leafed through Agnes's journal by the light of a small fire, she discovered that it was more than a simple collection of recipes. Between instructions for herb-infused broths and healing teas were entries detailing Agnes's life and the secret she had kept for decades. Lord Ravenscroft came again today, read one entry from 30 years earlier. He says the palace has requested my barley and mushroom soup for the prince's wedding feast. If they only knew the true source of its flavor. The herbs from the pond's depths, growing on that strange stone. The same stone that bears the royal seal, hidden there all these years. I dare not remove it, but each year I harvest the herbs that grow upon it, and each year my fame at court grows. The irony would make me laugh if it did not frighten me so. Rose read on, her heart quickening. According to Agnes's writings, the pond on her property contained a secret, a submerged stone bearing the royal seal. Agnes had discovered that rare herbs grew on this stone, imparting a unique flavor to her cooking that had made her dishes famous among the nobility, despite her humble status. But there was more. The stone, Agnes believed, marked the hiding place of something valuable, something that Lord Ravenscroft's ancestor had concealed there during the civil wars a century ago. Something the current Lord Ravenscroft desperately wanted to recover without drawing attention from the royal court. He offered to buy the property again, Agnes wrote. The price increases each time. I refused, as always. It is not about the money, it is about the truth. The truth that I have kept hidden all these years, just as the stone keeps its secret hidden beneath the water. Rose closed the journal, her mind racing. Was this why she had been named Agnes's heir? Because they shared a distant blood connection, making Rose the safest person to entrust with whatever secret lay in the pond? A sound outside startled her, the crack of a twig, followed by hushed voices. Rose extinguished the fire with a handful of sand, plunging the cottage into darkness. Patch growled low in his throat, the hair on his back standing up. Quiet, Rose whispered, moving to the window. In the moonlight, she could make out two figures approaching the cottage, men in dark cloaks, moving with the furtive purpose of those who do not wish to be seen. Lord Ravenscroft said the old woman is dead, one of them said in a low voice. The property should be empty. What if someone else has claimed it? The other asked. Then we make them an offer. And if they refuse? The man's hand moved to his belt, where a dagger gleamed in the moonlight. Rose's blood ran cold. She shrank back from the window, clutching Patch to keep him silent. Her mind raced. The cottage had only one door and two windows, easily blocked by the men outside. She was trapped unless... Her eyes fell on the journal. Agnes had mentioned a cellar in one entry, accessed by a trapdoor beneath the large rug in the center of the room. Rose had assumed it was just a root cellar, but now it might be her only escape route. Moving silently, Rose pushed aside the threadbare rug. There, almost invisible against the dirt floor, was the outline of a trapdoor. She worked her fingers into the small gap at one edge and pulled. The door lifted with a faint groan, revealing a ladder descending into darkness. A loud knock at the cottage door made her jump. Hello? Is anyone within? Rose grabbed Agnes's journal and the deed, then urged Patch toward the opening. The dog hesitated, then descended the ladder with surprising agility. Rose followed, pulling the trapdoor closed above her just as the cottage door burst open. The cellar was pitch black and smelled of damp earth and old wine. Rose felt her way forward cautiously, one hand on the rough stone wall, the other clutching the journal to her chest. Patch stayed close, his warm body pressing against her legs. After several paces, Rose's hand encountered not stone but wood, what felt like a door set into the cellar wall. She found a latch, lifted it, and pushed. The door swung open, revealing a narrow tunnel, its height forcing her to stoop. "Where does this lead?" she whispered to Patch, though of course the dog couldn't answer. They had no choice but to follow it. The tunnel sloped gently upward, curving to the left. After what seemed an eternity of crawling through the darkness, Rose saw a faint glimmer of light ahead. The tunnel ended at another small door, this one with tiny cracks around its edges through which moonlight seeped. Rose pushed it open cautiously and found herself emerging from what appeared to be an ancient tree stump at the edge of the pond. The cottage was visible about 50 paces away, lantern light now glowing from its windows as the intruders searched inside. "Clever Agnes," Rose murmured, realizing the tunnel provided a secret escape route from the cottage to the pond. But why? What was so important about this murky pool of water? Patch didn't wait for Rose to ponder this question. He bounded straight for the pond and plunged in, swimming directly to its center as he had done earlier that day. This time, in the moonlight, Rose saw what she had missed before. As Patch dived, the water rippled, revealing for a moment something solid beneath, the corner of what looked like a large, flat stone. Understanding dawned. The stone Agnes mentioned in her journal, the one bearing the royal seal, the one hiding something valuable, was there, at the bottom of the pond. Patch had been trying to show her all along. But with the men searching the cottage, Rose couldn't investigate now. She needed to flee to find help. The village was too far, and besides, she knew no one there she could trust. But the journal had mentioned someone who might help, Agnes's friend, the herbalist who lived in a cottage near the old oak grove, half a league to the east. "Come, Patch," Rose called softly. The dog emerged reluctantly from the pond, shaking water from his coat. Together, they slipped away into the forest, the sounds of the intruders' frustrated search fading behind them. The herbalist's cottage was smaller than Agnes's, but in far better repair. A garden of medicinal plants surrounded it, their scents mingling in the night air. Rose knocked tentatively at the door, hoping she wasn't making a terrible mistake. After a moment, the door opened a crack, and an elderly woman peered out, a candle held high. "Who comes at this hour?" "My name is Rose Briar. I am Agnes Thistle's heir. Men are searching her cottage, our cottage, and I believe we are in danger." The woman studied Rose's face for a long moment, then her eyes dropped to Patch, still damp from the pond. "You found the tunnel, I see, and the dog has shown you the stone." It wasn't a question. She opened the door wider. "Come in quickly. My name is Winifred. Agnes and I were friends for over 40 years. Once inside, Rose told Winifred everything: the inheritance, the journal, the deed, the men searching the cottage, and Patch's strange behavior at the pond. Winifred listened without interruption, her weathered face grave. When Rose finished, the old woman nodded slowly. "Agnes told me she planned to leave everything to you, though she never explained why she chose a distant relation she barely knew." Winifred poured a cup of herbal tea and handed it to Rose. "But I think I understand now. You see, Agnes wasn't just a cook. She was the keeper of a secret that goes back to the time of the Civil Wars." Rose sipped the tea, its warmth spreading through her tired body. "The stone in the pond?" "Yes. According to the story Agnes told me, during the height of the conflict, when the old king's supporters were being hunted down, the royal treasury was in danger of being seized. A loyal nobleman, Lord Vincent Ravenscroft, the first Earl of Nethermere, was entrusted with a portion of the royal jewels for safekeeping. The current Lord Ravenscroft's ancestor, Rose murmured. The very same. But Vincent Ravenscroft was no loyal subject. He hid the jewels, intending to keep them for himself, and reported to the king that they had been stolen. But he became ill before he could retrieve his prize and, fearing damnation, confessed his crime to his servant, Agnes's great-grandmother. Patch, who had been dozing by the fire, suddenly raised his head, ears pricked. The servant was given the deed to the cottage and land as payment for her silence. Winifred continued. The jewels remained hidden beneath the stone in the pond, which bears the royal seal as proof of their origin. 4 generations, Agnes's family has protected that secret, using only the herbs that grow on the stone, herbs that thrive because of the minerals in that particular spot. And the soup? Rose asked, remembering the journal's mention of a recipe famous at court. Ah, the barley and mushroom soup. Agnes discovered that the herbs from the stone gave it a flavor unlike any other. When Lord Ravenscroft's father tasted it at a village harvest festival, he recognized something unique about it and arranged for Agnes to prepare it for a royal banquet. It became so popular that Agnes was often called to cook for noble households, including the palace itself. But she never revealed the source of her herbs? Never. She knew that if she did, questions would be asked about the stone, and the truth might come out. The current Lord Ravenscroft suspects, I think. His father must have told him the family legend. He has been trying to buy the property for years. Rose set down her cup. So, these men searching the cottage are almost certainly Ravenscroft's men, looking for evidence of the jewels. Agnes told me she feared this would happen after her death. That is why she made sure Patch would go to you. He is the only one who knows exactly where the stone lies in the pond. But why me? Why not you, her friend? Winifred smiled sadly. I am old, Rose, older even than Agnes was. And I have no family to carry on the secret. But you have suffered loss, yet you have survived. Agnes admired that strength. She believed you would know what to do with her legacy. Outside, an owl hooted 3 times in quick succession. Winifred stiffened. That is Toby, the village boy who watches the road for me. Someone is coming. She moved quickly to the window, peering out into the darkness. Men on horseback, approaching from the direction of your cottage. Rose's heart raced. What do we do? There is little time. You must return to the cottage before they realize you have fled. The tunnel emerges near the pond. They will not have found it if they do not know to look for the entrance hidden in the tree stump. But they will be waiting for me at the cottage. Perhaps not. Listen carefully. This is what Agnes would want you to do. As dawn broke over Willowmead, Rose approached her cottage openly, Patch trotting at her side. She carried a basket of herbs and roots that Winifred had given her, playing the part of a woman who had simply gone foraging in the early morning. The cottage appeared undisturbed, though Rose noted fresh hoofprints in the mud around it. Entering cautiously, she found the interior ransacked, furniture overturned, floorboards pried up, the hearthstones disturbed. They were thorough, she murmured to Patch. But they did not find what they were looking for. Rose set about restoring order to the cottage, all the while watching the road through the window. According to Winifred, Lord Ravenscroft himself would likely appear once his men reported their failure to find the jewels. Sure enough, as midday approached, Rose spotted a party of riders approaching, a nobleman in fine clothing, accompanied by the 2 men from the previous night and several armed guards. Rose took a deep breath, adjusting the apron she had found among Agnes's belongings. On the table before her sat a steaming pot of barley and mushroom soup, prepared according to the recipe in Agnes's journal, with herbs Rose had harvested that morning from the stone in the pond, herbs that grew nowhere else in the kingdom. A firm knock sounded at the door. Enter, Rose called, her voice steadier than she felt. The door swung open to reveal a tall, imposing man with silver-streaked dark hair and a neatly trimmed beard. His clothing marked him clearly as nobility, a velvet doublet, fine leather boots, a gold signet ring on his right hand. "Mistress Briar?" he inquired, his voice cultured and smooth. "I am she. I am Lord Vincent Ravenscroft, Earl of Nethermere." He removed his hat with a slight bow. "I understand you have recently inherited this property." "Yes, my lord. From my mother's cousin, Agnes Thistle." Lord Ravenscroft's eyes darted around the cottage, noting the signs of the previous night's search poorly concealed by Rose's hasty cleaning. I see you have been rearranging things. The cottage needed attention, Rose replied evenly. It has been neglected these past years. Indeed. He stepped further into the room, his men remaining outside. I will come directly to the point, Mistress Briar. I wish to purchase this property from you. I am prepared to offer a generous sum, enough for you to buy a much finer home in the village, or even in the town of Hedgebrook. Rose tilted her head, feigning confusion. That is most generous, my lord. May I ask why this humble cottage interests you so? It adjoins my hunting lands, he said smoothly. The acquisition would be convenient. I see. Rose gestured to the table. I was just about to have my midday meal. Would you care to join me? It is a simple soup, but filling. Lord Ravenscroft hesitated, clearly taken aback by the invitation. His nostrils flared slightly as he caught the aroma rising from the pot. What is that you are serving? Barley and mushroom soup. An old family recipe. A flash of recognition crossed his face. Agnes Thistle's soup? The one served at court. The very same. Please sit. I would value your opinion on whether I have captured the essence of her recipe. Curiosity overcame caution, and Lord Ravenscroft seated himself at the table. Rose ladled the soup into 2 wooden bowls, setting one before him along with a chunk of bread she had baked that morning in the newly cleaned hearth. The nobleman took a spoonful, then another, his expression changing from polite interest to genuine pleasure. This is remarkable. Identical to what I have tasted at the palace. How did you master it so quickly? Agnes left detailed instructions, Rose said, seating herself across from him. The secret, she wrote, lies in herbs that grow in only one place, on a stone at the bottom of the pond behind this cottage. Lord Ravenscroft's spoon clattered against his bowl. The pond. Yes. A strange place for herbs to flourish, is it not? But Patch, that is Agnes's dog, showed me where to find them. He dives down to the stone each morning, showing me exactly where to harvest. The nobleman's face had paled slightly. This stone, did Agnes write anything else about it? Only that it was unusual, large and flat, with some sort of marking on it. I have not seen it clearly myself, as the water is quite murky. Lord Ravenscroft set down his spoon, his appetite apparently gone. Mistress Briar, let us speak plainly. I believe there is more to that stone than herbs. I am willing to pay handsomely for this property, 100 gold crowns. A fortune for someone in your position. Rose pretended to consider the offer, though Winifred had prepared her for this moment. It is indeed generous, my lord. But I find myself reluctant to part with my inheritance so quickly. This cottage, humble as it is, represents a fresh start for me after years of hardship. 200 crowns, he countered immediately. My lord, it is not simply about the money. Rose met his gaze steadily. This recipe alone could secure my future. The royal steward has already expressed interest in hiring me as a cook, once word reached him that Agnes's heir had successfully recreated her famous soup. This was the gambit Winifred had suggested, letting Lord Ravenscroft know that Rose had connections at court, making it dangerous for him to simply seize the property or harm her. The nobleman's jaw tightened. I see. You drive a hard bargain, Mistress Briar. 300 crowns, and not a penny more. Rose shook her head. Forgive me, but I must decline. However, I might consider a different arrangement. She leaned forward slightly. I understand there is a vacant cottage on the edge of your estate, the one by the mill stream. If you were to grant me ownership of that cottage, along with a small pension for my services, I would be willing to part with this property. Services? Lord Ravenscroft frowned. What services? I would continue to prepare Agnes's recipes exclusively for your household and for the royal court when requested. The herbs from the pond would be harvested solely for this purpose. The arrangement would bring prestige to your name at court as the patron of the kingdom's most sought-after dishes. The nobleman studied her face, clearly weighing his options. Rose held her breath. This was the crux of Winifred's plan, offering Lord Ravenscroft a way to save face, while ensuring Rose's safety and prosperity. "You are as shrewd as your cousin was," he finally said. "Very well. The Mill Cottage, a pension of 20 crowns annually, and your services as cook for special occasions. In exchange, I take possession of this property immediately. With one condition," Rose added. "The pond remains undisturbed. The herbs must continue to grow there for the recipes to maintain their unique flavor." Lord Ravenscroft's eyes narrowed. "The pond remains as it is," he agreed after a moment's hesitation. "Do we have an accord?" "We do, my lord." The transaction was formalized that very afternoon. Rose signed the deed transferring ownership of Agnes's cottage to Lord Ravenscroft, while he signed over the Mill Cottage to her, along with a document guaranteeing her annual pension. As Rose packed her few belongings, Agnes's journal, some cooking implements, and clothes, Lord Ravenscroft supervised his men in a cursory examination of the property. They paid particular attention to the pond, though, as Rose had anticipated, none of them attempted to dive to its depths. By evening, Rose and Patch were settled in their new home, a sturdy stone cottage beside a clear, flowing stream, with a garden twice the size of Agnes's and a proper root cellar beneath the kitchen. "We did well, did we not, Patch?" Rose said, scratching behind the dog's ears as they sat before the fire in their new hearth. "Lord Ravenscroft thinks he has won, but so have we." Patch wagged his tail in agreement, then settled his head on Rose's lap with a contented sigh. 2 days later, a royal messenger arrived at the Mill Cottage, bearing an invitation for Rose to prepare Agnes's famous barley and mushroom soup for the upcoming visit of a foreign dignitary. The messenger also delivered a small wooden box, a gift from the Queen herself, containing seeds for rare herbs to plant in Rose's new garden. When the messenger had gone, Winifred arrived for a visit, her eyes twinkling with mischief. "Well, did our plan succeed?" Rose smiled, pouring tea for her new friend. "Perfectly. Lord Ravenscroft believes the jewels are hidden beneath the stone in the pond. He will search there, finding nothing but the herbs that give the soup its distinctive flavor. And the real treasure? Safely hidden where Agnes actually concealed it, in the hollow tree stump that conceals the tunnel entrance. I retrieved it before Lord Ravenscroft's arrival and reburied it beneath the apple tree in my new garden, as you suggested. The jewels, a small but valuable collection of rubies, emeralds, and pearls that had once adorned the royal crown, would remain hidden until Rose could determine the best course of action. Winifred believed they should eventually be returned to the royal treasury, but with a request for a formal pardon for Agnes's family and a permanent position for Rose at court. "Agnes would be proud," Winifred said, raising her cup in a toast. "You have secured your future, preserved her legacy, and outsmarted a nobleman who has been trying to recover those jewels for decades." "The soup recipe was the true treasure," Rose replied. "Without it, we would have had no leverage with Lord Ravenscroft. He could simply have taken the property by force." But a simple peasant woman's recipe becoming the most requested dish at the royal court? That gave you power he could not easily overcome." Winifred chuckled. "Sometimes the humblest things contain the greatest value, like herbs growing on a stone, or a loyal dog who knows where to find them." Patch, hearing himself mentioned, thumped his tail against the floor. In the months that followed, Rose's reputation as a cook grew throughout the kingdom. The Queen herself requested Rose's presence at the palace for important state dinners, and nobles vied for her services at their banquets. The barley and mushroom soup remained her signature dish, though she expanded Agnes's repertoire with creations of her own. Lord Ravenscroft, after secretly dredging the pond and finding nothing but the herb-covered stone bearing the royal seal, eventually conceded defeat. He became, ironically, one of Rose's most ardent supporters at court, boasting of his connection to the kingdom's most celebrated cook, as if it had been his idea all along to bring her talents to the palace. The jewels remained buried beneath the apple tree, a secret between Rose, Winifred, and Patch. Perhaps one day, Rose thought, she would reveal their existence to the crown. But for now, they served as insurance, protection against the day when her recipes might no longer be enough to secure her place in the world. As for Patch, he grew fat and contented in their new home, though he never lost his habit of diving into water whenever they passed a pond or stream. Rose would laugh and remind him that they had already found their treasure, not in jewels or gold, but in the simple recipe that had transformed a penniless widow into the royal family's most cherished cook. And on quiet evenings, when the kitchen was clean and the fire burned low, Rose would open Agnes's journal and whisper a prayer of thanks to the cousin she had barely known, the woman who had given her not just a cottage and a dog, but a future built on the unexpected power of a humble peasant woman's soup.